Hello everyone. Let's do a bit more work on improving our page wrapper. As we can see, we currently have two pages, Edit Idea page and View Idea page, where we had to manually set types for the idea. That is, even though we've passed the checks on check exists, we are not yet outputting the correct type, and it should be such that this idea is definitely not null because it has passed the check exists check. On this page and on this page, let's deal with this. There are many ways, and I propose the following. I find it more universal than others and simpler to implement than, for example, if we did the following when check exists returns true, then in query result, this should be non-null because it's hard to make it universal since all endpoints are different and who knows how they will operate. Therefore, I suggest a solution of the following format. Let's go to Page Wrapper and create at the top level 2 new error types and preset types for our functions, check exists and check access, as follows. Look, we create check exists error, which inherits from error. This is the only place I use a class when declaring errors. Generally, I don't like classes at all. I'm a proponent of something like a functional style. All right, but with errors, you can't work differently. They need to inherit from a regular error. It doesn't differ from a regular error except that when it's created, we can understand it's exactly this one, not some other random error. Later, it will become clear why this is needed. We also declare a function, checkExistsFn, which takes a generic type, simply called t. When you have one generic, it's normal to just call it t. The comma here is needed purely as a JSX quirk. It doesn't understand what's going on. It thinks that this might be some kind of component or something like that. You just need to put a comma in such situations. These are just syntax issues. Okay? And we pass some value to this checkExistsFn, which actually defines the type of this generic. And this function will return the same type t, but which is definitely not null, not undefined, but something else. And how does it work under the hood? If the value doesn't exist, we simply throw an error with the message passed to this function. Or if there's no message, then, respectively, with undefined. And by analogy, check exists error, also an error that we inherit from the error. And check exists fn takes exactly the same value. And if this value does not exist, it throws this error. No return is needed here because check access doesn't affect any types, but check exists does. And accordingly, if we pass something to the check exists function and then get the result of its execution, we'll get the same value, absolutely the same, but we'll know that its type is precisely non-nullable, not what it was. Non-nullable t. All right? Now we need to play around with set props. I want to set it up so that on the page itself, for example, in the Edit Idea page, it looks like this. So you can define our checkExists and checkAccess functions right here. I want to pass them here into checkExists, pass our idea, and at this point already have a non-nullable idea, because if checkExists fails, an error will be thrown and the code won't proceed further. Move checkAccess here. And thanks to this, we could remove this entirely. Let's implement this now. So, in setProps, the input types have changed accordingly. If all other helpers that we have, for example, checkExists, which we will still allow to be used in this format, but they only accepted, as you saw, result and KTX. But specifically, setProps should accept some additional helpers. Therefore, we'll have to change these types to some others, namely the following. So setProps will be like this. This is setProps props. Because the setProps function, what it accepts are its props. That's why it turned out setProps props. So, we need to define this setProps type as a kind of helper. It will be like this. So what does it take in? Just like generic .tquery result. It takes in the same helper props as before. That is, it remains the same. But it also extends this object with this. You can extend an object in types with an ampersand. Here's checkExists. And checkExists is a type of checkExists.fn. So, in reality, we will not be using this function. We are only interested in its type. And checkaccess.fn is also the type of this function. Good. We've passed them. setProps now accepts new types. And now let's add the usage. We need to replace this code. Previously, we passed a helper props to setProps. And now we're passing a larger value, which is why we're getting an error for missing checkExists and checkaccess. Let's change the code to the following. How will it work? We inserted try-catch and are calling the setProps function, this function. And it can throw errors. This function can throw an error. And this function can throw an error. Well, I lied. We use these functions. Yes, all correct. Look, here we pass them here. checkExists.fn and checkaccess.fn moved here. That's why I named them with fn, because we have checkExists as well, which are passed here like this through props. That means we left the option to use both interfaces. And like this, an old one. All right? So we're calling setProps. It might have thrown errors. If it did throw errors, we end up here. We see error. If error is an instance of checkExists, error, which we defined. This is exactly why we defined it as a separate special error to help understand that this specific one was thrown. That's it. If specifically this error was thrown, then we return error page component with the title checkExists title. So it is saved with us. We just pass it through our usual props. So in message, we pass either error message or checkExists message. Okay? And this error, well, you get it, right? So where could this error have come from here? When we threw this function, we passed this message here. And that's why we can pass anything here like this. Theoretically, we can extend it and pass title into this function as well. So you can do it like this. It's up to you. But I believe that title is always the same in such cases. So the title will literally be access denied or not found. And here, it's reasonable to write why access denied, or what exactly wasn't found. But nothing stops you from adjusting this for yourself, for your project, okay? All right. And accordingly, if it's an error, then it's property. If it's an error, then it's property. Here. What did this give us in practical application? We removed the code from here that was, and here we assign the query result to the idea. Here we hover over the idea and see that it's either the idea or null. And here we hover over the idea and see that the idea is exclusively the idea and cannot be null. Because in the checkExists function, we have indicated that it returns a non-nullable t when t was a value. That's it. And checkExists, well, we no longer assign it to anything. So here we just expect that an error might be thrown. In principle, this can be returned to the old place. Well, you can just use it here now too. Use it however you like, that's all. And we return the idea, but we already know the idea is non-nullable. And here it is, like this. Okay. And let's apply the same to the View Idea page. In the View Idea page, it will look like this. That's it. And we can remove this. Now let's check if it works. So here's our idea page, and it's not found. So the behavior hasn't changed. The integration method changed. Okay? And now, let's say, all ideas, good idea. That's our idea. Super idea? That's not our idea, right? Okay? Let's try to edit it. Done. It says, access denied. Excellent. Everything works. So we've improved our types, and now we don't need to use exclamation marks, and all types automatically propagate. I recommend not using exclamation marks at all. So, Find ways to avoid it. So types should be generated properly. Good. Thank you. We've improved the types. We can move on. These lessons were a bit challenging. I understand. It will get easier. Though I've said that before. But it will literally get easier next. Then maybe more difficult again. That's how development is. At first, it's difficult. Then you figure it out, and then programming becomes really enjoyable. And yet, in programming, there's never a point where you know everything. If that were the case, maybe you wouldn't enjoy programming as much. It's an ongoing development process. Okay, thank you all. See you soon. To be continued.